John Bryan, and welcome to the Driven Podcast. We're here in Tulsa, Oklahoma again at the Exposition Hall, and the ABA meeting is happening today, and we still have lots of people here in the booths walking around, so you're going to get some of that noise in the background. But I'm here today with Jason Carlton, and Jason is filling in for Nathan Rogers, who is out today again. So we appreciate you standing in, Jason.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed this, and occasionally, you know, we do have a lot of folks coming by. We occasionally get heckled by our good ministry friends, so you may hear some of that in the background.
That's right. Our guest today is DougCurtis. Doug is the camp superintendent at Bogg Springs in Wickes, Arkansas. Doug, we're really glad that you took the time to be with us.
I'm thankful for the opportunity. I always love to talk about camp, John.
So this is cool for me. Doug's a good friend of mine. I call DeQueen when we are at ministry meetings like this. Most people don't know where DeQueen is. Everybody knows where Bogg Springs is. So I start describing DeQueen. We're the gateway city to Bogg Springs. We should put that on our town sign.
Sure.
We're the closest McDonald's to Bogg Springs, the closest super center to Bogg Springs. So that's kind of how people relate to us. But one of the benefits of us living that close is that we are able to come up and visit the camp sometimes when we have no official responsibility. So it's nice for me sometimes to bring the kids up, just visit and hang out, and I get to see ministry friends from all over because a lot of folks make a stop through Bogg Springs in the summer. One of the things that I wanted to talk about and lead off with today, let's say that hypothetically we show up on week 2 of camp and the camp has a certain vibe, a certain feel to it, and we show up on week 5, it's like we're at a totally different place. The only thing that's the same are the buildings, and everything else looks and sounds different activities and music. So I was going to see if you could just kind of walk us through some of that. Why are the weeks of camp so different, and how does that work?
Bogg Springs is a place, not a thing. And I think that's a good way to answer your question. The place is the same. The thing is Oklahoma camp one week and Southwest camp the next week and kids camp and teen camp. So I think sometimes people tend to just think about Bogg Springs as being a thing, but it's a place where things happen. And what happens in an individual week is the responsibility of the officers of that week of camp, and those officers are in turn selected by the churches that make up that week of camp. Some people do a great deal of pre-camp planning. They will leave on a Friday in July and they have a debrief meeting in September. And then they have a planning meeting in January, and then their final planning meeting is in April. And then there's others that have a business meeting on Thursday afternoon, and to the best of my knowledge, outside of very few little odds and ends that might be looked at later, that's their planning. And everybody's got a right to do it the way they want to. But that talks to the difference. And then of course you've got just regional difference. And some people like it just how they used to do it, and they have that right. And some people like it to be far more contemporary in music or otherwise. Some of the camps do a great deal of work on recreation being very inclusive. And what we mean by that is that they're trying to think of ways that all 400 kids that might be there that week are playing something. In other weeks, they'll have tournaments set up of volleyball, basketball, softball, whatever. And if you're not into any of those things, then you go sit under a tree. And that's fine too, if that's how you want to do it. But it takes a lot of work to do a great week of camp. And different groups do it different ways. We've seen it all, and it's just as Jason just said earlier, you know, you come up there one week, except for the fact that you're at the same place, you're not at a similar thing, really at all. Some of them are very much into the praise band thing. They will bring in guests for late night. Jeremy Camp is highly touted contemporary Christian artist, and nobody heard of him when they booked him 12 years ago to come to one of our teen camps, but by the time he actually got there a few months later, he was #1 on the charts. Well, some people, that's the sort of things that they do. Jamie Grace was there last year. She's an awesome young lady. Just loved her to death. And then some people don't feel any need to reach outside of their group, and that's fine too. It's just everybody gets to do it how they want to. All that's none of my business. As superintendent, I think I have the right to veto something that I think is damaging to the facility or unsafe for the campers. Beyond that, it's zero my business how they choose to do
What is your
it.
business?
My business is the facility. And somebody has got to make sure that the grass was mowed, and somebody's got to make sure that the groceries are there. There have been enhancements to the facility the last couple of years, longer than a couple now, but the ropes course and zip line was a real game changer for our staff people. Because they used to have their certain little things they did, but now we have to have certification time where they're all certified by an expert, and the insurance demands this anyway. But this guy comes out, or gal, it's been about half and half, he or she first inspects the course. They go over, they climb the poles, they look at every bolt, they look at every clamp. Then they get our kids up there and they do 2 days of extensive training and then a half day of testing. And if they don't pass, then I have to go looking for somebody else. And if the facility doesn't pass, they say, Doug, you've got to replace these whatevers. But that's a whole game changer compared to where things used to be with the staff facility. And Philip Peavyhouse, who's our chairman of trustees, and at our camp workshop yesterday, I think he said something that bears repeating. He says, this is about the kids. We hope we have a reasonable level of comfort. We hope there's a decent chance you have a hot shower. If there's 60 people in the building, you very well may run out of hot water, and we recognize that. A gentleman was there last week that was complaining about the food, and I said, all I can say is I eat every meal that you guys do, and I do.
Yeah.
There may be a Wednesday night on the 7th week that I say, Sherry, please go home and make me some squash and fried potatoes. But other than that, I eat every meal that they do. And for the price that we charge, which Bogg Springs gets $80 for 4 nights, 11 meals, a zip line that they would pay $50 if they just went on a zip line tour at Branson or something. And I think our food is very adequate for the price. It could be better. I'm sure somebody could come up with some idea that we could do something different. But you asked me what my job is. My job is there water running? Is the grass mowed? Is the food there? Are the kids that are my staff doing what they're supposed to do where they're supposed to be doing it?
Well, one of the things that we want to do in this podcast is just to broadcast information and try to help get information in the hands of people that need it. If there's someone out there, maybe they're not in Arkansas, Texas, or Louisiana church, but maybe they're far off somewhere. You've had people travel a long way to come to Bogg Springs. One of the reasons is that even with their travel expenses, once that's covered, the cost of the camp itself is so competitive compared to what they would find nationally. What's been your experience in that?
Well, Hillcrest Church, it's in the Atlanta, Georgia area. Mike Maxwell's a very good friend, and they've come to Bogg Springs for years. It cost them more to get there than to pay their camp fee once they got there. And I'm sure they could have they had options at home that were cheaper because they spent maybe $6,000 chartering a bus, and paid us $4,000 when they got there for 40 kids or something. But I tell this story a lot. I'll just tell it again. A couple of years ago, we were at my wife's great aunt's 90th birthday party at her Methodist church in Hot Springs, and I'm walking the halls just looking around. I see a table, and it's got brochures for different things, and one of the brochures was their week of camp was coming up, and their camp fee was $395. And Bogg Springs gets $80, and then the individual groups add what they need. The more they do, the more they need to add. If they're bringing in a Jamie Grace and she costs $6,000, they get enough to cover that. But I'll even say this, as far as those camps are concerned, that means the kids basically all paid an extra $8 to see Jamie Grace. And how much would it cost to go to a Jamie Grace event? And some people spend a lot more on their recreation activities than others do and everything. But the most expensive week of camp is still $150, their part and our part. And it's half what going to Super Summer cost you or various other things.
Well, so I'm privileged to spend 2 weeks in Bogg Springs this summer. One of them is coming up this Monday. As we head to West Central, the cost on that's $100.
Right.
So that covers the cost of the camp fee, the $80 to you, but then we bring in inflatables for the kids. Water games were really good on those hot afternoons.
Yeah, exactly.
So they get to play, and then covers the cost of a t-shirt per kid. We just write that into the cost
Right.
and bill them $100. So that's how that works. And then later on with teen camp is more in the range of $125, but like you're talking about, last year they got a Jamie Grace concert in that. So it's an incredible diversity, really. So if someone's out there, and we've talked about the diversity of the different weeks of camp, how do they know which one that is going to be the best fit for them? Where's the clearinghouse of information? How do they?
The clearinghouse is usually me or Sherry on the phone.
Yeah.
And people will call and they'll say, we are interested in coming to Bogg Springs. We've never been there before. My first question is, are you talking about teenagers, or are you talking about little kids, or do you want to bring them all to 1 week? If they're saying teens only, then the first thing I'll say is, well, you might like kids camp. I said, but there are other groups that bring their teens, like Memorial is a perfect example. My church, Jason's church, our younger kids will be here this coming week at West Central Camp, and then our teens will be back in a couple of weeks after that at one of the teen camps. But that's the first thing I say is, what age group are you talking about? The second group is, I say, do you like a more traditional service, or do you like a praise band? Does this thing offend you, or that thing offend you, or whatever? Because the last thing in the world I want is an unhappy camper.
Right.
I do not want a pastor to go to all the trouble and expense of loading the kids up and driving hours to get there and then be unhappy. So I do my dead level best to understand what they're looking for, and then try to say, well, your best two options might be this week or that week, because we don't want unhappy campers.
Yeah. You and I share a unique ministry experience in that we both followed our fathers who were themselves institutions at their institutions.
Yeah.
So how long have you been the superintendent there, and how long was your dad there before? And walk us through sort of that transition, because that, beyond just the camp thing, that's sort of a universal constant of following somebody who was an icon at their institution, and there are some unique challenges to that.
There are. My dad went there in 1964. I moved there in 94 and really became, quote, superintendent in 96. For the first couple of years, I was his assistant. A couple of years after that, he was my assistant as far as how it was literally laid out. So he was there over 30, and I'm working on 22 now, I guess, is about right. I think the fact that I grew up there, a lot of people, because my father was beloved, made some things a little bit easier. People that might have not liked something I would have done as much as they could have or should have or whatever. Well, that's Doug. He's okay because we love to wife, And I don't know that it gave me any challenges that were negative things. I think it was far more beneficial. And it's probably that's probably an easier thing than the pastoral thing might be in some cases. It was also obviously helpful. Anybody could learn the things that needed. Well, no, I won't say that. Not everybody could do it, but the fact that I did grow up there certainly made a few things easier. Just a matter of knowing which water line was buried where and that sort of thing. So that was a little bit of the same thing. Of course, people in our community, many of them think that the Curtis family owns Bogg Springs, and Andrew grew up at school with people saying he's rich because his family owns Bogg Springs. And so we tried to disabuse people of that thought through the years. Actually, some guys from the electric company were out working on a project, and one of them went to school with Andrew. This is a couple of years ago. And he said, well, Doug, is Andrew going to take over and retire? I said, well, he'll be an awfully educated camp superintendent since he's about to finish law school. And he said, what are you going to do? You going to hire somebody or whatever? And I said, well, Brandon, let me tell you what this is. I said, my dad was offered the job in 1964, and when he got ready to retire, I applied for a job that 9 other people applied for. And the trustees deemed that I was the guy they wanted to hire, and the fact that I grew up made me an attractive candidate. But they could have hired 8 other guys. And if Andrew wanted to do it, he'd be applying for a job along with whoever else applied. And so that it doesn't belong to us. I said we feel like it belongs to us in terms of the heart of a steward, because a good steward should treat the thing that he's responsible for as kindly or even more so than his own needs or wants or whatever. I'm far more frivolous with DougCurtis's money than I am Bogg Springs' money, because when I save $1, I feel like I've saved the kid $1 on his camp fee ultimately, and that's how I hope I should look at things.
So you're not the owner.
I'm not the owner.
You're not the owner, but who is the owner?
The owner is the Churches of the American Baptist Association. But even that's a kind of a nebulous question, because on an absolutely legal question, that's kind of hard to quantify, because the ABA doesn't exist in the same fashion business-wise that other church denominations exist. And there are people that own Bogg Springs that have never been there, technically. There are people that own Bogg Springs that don't like that we own the church camp. Not Bogg Springs itself, or British period, you know. But they're actually part owners. But it's kind of a weird thing. But we're owned by the churches of this association. And just an aside for people that maybe don't know how it works, this afternoon we'll give a camp report, and after that report is given, trustees will be elected. And what typically happens is the 5 trustees will be renominated, and people can have the privilege of substituting if they want to make a change. And then I answer to those 5 trustees, who they answer to the association. And I think it was a great source of wisdom to set it up just the way that we did. Conrad Glover, I believe, made the motion in 1960. The motion was made to buy the property, and then a motion was made to elect J.B. Powers, O.H. Griffith, and E.E. Swearingen as trustees, and they are to hire managerial help as they see the need. And I think the wording of that amendment in our book came from C.N. Glover. And then in 1964, they decided to make the trustee a 5-person board instead of a 3-person board. And I think it works great. I don't think we can, as an association, operate a week of camp. I don't think we can have an association that says, I don't like Jason's preaching, so he can't preach. But West Central Camp can say, we nominate Jason as director, which he's going to be, or we nominate him as evangelist. But we can't own a facility jointly. And I think it works beautifully just how Brother Glover and whoever else might have been involved in that thing does it. We own a facility, and the independent local ABA churches that come that week get together and run it how they see fit.
A lot of the people who are going to be listening to this are not from Arkansas, maybe would not participate in Bogg Springs, but tell us a little bit about Pine Springs. Also,
okay.
Because that's another camp that is owned through the association.
Well, Pine Springs Camp was started building it in 72. I could ask my dad all this and know for sure. But Bogg Springs was full to the gills, and there was no room. The summer was full, the facility was full. There were 2 state camps from Texas that were running in the 700s and 800s. And so I remember driving around East Texas with my mom and dad and going to look at this 80 acres they heard about, or that 100 acres that they heard about. And I clearly remember driving into the Pine Springs area, and I was 11 or 12, and my mom says, this is it. And the tabernacle will go right there, and the cafeteria could go right here and everything. But there are only 2 camps that are actually owned and operated by the association, and that is Bogg Springs and Pine Springs. And Pine Springs is vastly made up of Texas churches. I know there have been some Louisiana churches just across the line that have been involved. It's been said that Bogg Springs is an Arkansas camp, Texas is Pine Springs is a Texas camp. And that's really not accurate on the Bogg Springs side, but it's very accurate on the Texas side. But we have Oklahoma camp at Bogg Springs, we have Louisiana camp, and then the teen weeks and kids camp have people from several states. But in addition to those, we have Bud Creek, which is owned by local associations in northeast Arkansas. Cedar Hills camp in western Oklahoma that is owned by a local church, if I understand things correctly, out there. And then Glenwood is in South Louisiana. Clear Living Waters Camp in Kansas. Yellow Creek is, yes, Yellow Creek in northern Alabama. And then there are several camps, that those local associations rent a certain place. It's year after year after year. The folks in the Ohio, Indiana area have been renting a camp in Miamisburg, Ohio for years, and they've got a great relationship with those people, that they've been renting from them for forever and ever. But in most cases, that costs more. There's an economy to owning the facility, and we're fortunate that we own it. When I think of the people that stepped up and said, let's do this, I'm just filled with gratitude, not on a personal level, although that too, but I can't even imagine this association if you said the church camp never existed. And that sounds, I know it existed You know, I know the association existed, but how many people know people that they know only because they go to Southwest Camp or West Central Camp or something? Oh yeah. Well, my daughter created a Facebook page a few years ago called "I Met My Spouse at Bogg Springs."
Oh, that's great.
I don't know how many members there are, but my children are both members.
Well, you mentioned giving your report. That's coming up in maybe 20 or 30 minutes or so, and then you're actually headed back that direction.
Yeah.
Always something else to be done. And with the facilities there, the work never stops. I know it's in capable hands while you're away, but you always feel that pull this time of year that you need to get back to camp, and we'll be there very shortly.
Well, I've got several chores on the list for all day tomorrow, all day Friday. I've got a tree that is threatening the zip line right now, and I can cut a tree down, but I'm scared to death of this one. And a gentleman that goes to County Avenue or Northern Hills, as I should say, is a tree expert that my dad knows, and he's supposed to come up Saturday morning. So I hope we've got a tree on the ground Saturday instead of letting over the zip line.
Great.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for visiting with us today. I hope that we've answered some questions and maybe anticipated some and get a little glimpse into your world in Bogg Springs and the greater world of youth camp in general. And it's such a good thing that we grew up with as a common experience, and to give this next generation a boost in coming up in their spiritual lives. You guys play an important role.
Jason, thank you very much, and John, thank you for inviting me to. I never mind an opportunity to talk about church camp. I'm so thankful for what it has meant in our associations.
We appreciate you being here.
Thank you for the time.